All right, guys. So today we're gonna talk some about goals. Um, so it's not your usual conversation about how to make goals, how to set goals. Just more from a mental health angle and a general angle of how to apply different types of skills, tips, things that you can do to realize maybe what it is that is making it hard to reach the goals. That's usually the first step that I think a lot of people miss. Because oftentimes it's not too hard to be like, okay, I have this goal, and that can be any kind of goal. If you think about, if you've ever seen like what's called like a balance wheel, like a lifestyle balance wheel, and you look at that wheel and you're like, okay, maybe I have some spiritual goals. A lot of people have holidays coming up, so that can combine spiritual sometimes, or social, or health, physical health, mental health, financial. I mean, that can all be lumped into even like holiday planning, right? And then in addition to that, we can look at, just financial in general, just social in general, um, like different kind of areas. And then each of those areas can be kind of broken down too. And those aren't the only areas, but those are some of the major areas that a lot of people want to focus on. A lot of people have relationship issues and they're like, oh, I want this to be better. And like, if you have like a partner or multiple partners or whatever your relationship structures look like, or getting some clarity on some other angles with social, like that can mean family, friends, whatever. And relationships is kind of lumped into social too, but I mean, social can also mean, just anyone you're interacting with. Sometimes people have work goals, so that can mean, productivity at your job, or, certain goals you want to reach at your job, or focus and energy levels. That's definitely something I have with my job that I'm trying to remedy. And then in addition to that, I'd say personally for myself, that's combined with physical health, with mental health, with finances, with, living environment, cleaning schedules, things like that people might, well, I'm not talking about myself right now, but like cleaning schedules. Some people are like, I want to be neater, I want to be more organized. You might have educational goals, all sorts of goals, and I'm sure I left some of them out too, but I mean, those are like some major categories, and you can see some of them overlap and cross over, and then there are others of those goals that don't overlap, and they're kind of more separated out. But you can see it can kind of depend how you're looking at something, what kind of overlaps with what. Like, so like how I was mentioning, for example, with holidays. So holidays, can combine a lot of things like financial and travel and family and social and, spiritual, or, other types of things, right? And then say if you're looking at financial, that can also include like mental health. It might include social as well. It just depends on how your life is structured, how things kind of look, right? So you can look at those balance wheels and kind of see like, okay, I don't think I'm balancing this very well or that very well. And then this other stuff, maybe you're overcompensating and doing way more of this other stuff. But when you see that there's something that's low, so say if you do have spiritual or religious or, even like coping practices or whatever it is that you do, that's supposed to revive you, refresh you, whatever it is that you do, you just want to make for sure you're looking at the details behind it. Because sometimes we'll have the goal, we'll have the desire to want the change, but the main issue isn't so much how do I get from point A to point B. A lot of times the main issue is going to be how do I get motivated? How do I get motivated to go from where I am now to actually follow through to the point to get where I need to go? The structuring isn't that hard for most of us. For most things, you can usually look at the end result that you want and then backtrack. So say, for example, with education, for example, that's something that can be a little bit easier. Like, it's not maybe easy, simple to do, but say, for example, if you're in a 1-year program, 2 semesters, no winter, no summer sessions, nothing like that. Mind you, I have not been in school for a long time now, so I don't even know what school's actually really like at this very point in time, but from what I recall, say you're in school, say you're taking a class that's supposed to get you a certificate with a series of classes, let's say, in a program of a sort that's a year long, that's 12 months. So by month 12, you should have the certificate. And then maybe that's going to lead you to a better job opportunity. So maybe there are certain jobs you want to apply to that require this specific certificate. You can't get to the certificate until you finish the 12-month worth of coursework. And say, for example, if every term, so 2 terms, if every term is 4 months, I don't know, that doesn't sound right. If every term is 5 months, I don't know. And then, dude, that would make it really long. But I think a semester is like 16 weeks, right? But say it's broken up, 16 weeks, that's 4 months. Your program is broken up into 2 4-month periods, right? And you can basically look at each class. Each class usually will give you a syllabus at the very beginning, right? Laying out what you do week 2, what you do week 5, what you do week 6, what you do week 11, 12, 13, on to 16, right? And so you'll have a whole syllabus that lays out your whole class coursework, what's due when. Yeah, it's likely to change, but it's probably not going to change so drastically that like every single week everything's different by the time you finish it. Usually an organized instructor isn't going to do that to you. Technically, for a lot of things, you could technically finish a lot of it if you had the energy and motivation and the books and the materials and all you needed. You could probably learn everything you needed before the class even really got rolling, and then finish everything and then be done when you're able to be done near week 16 or so. And then that could be it, right? That could be it. I'm not saying that's totally how it works, because I'm just simplifying things just as an example, though. But the reason why I use classwork is because somebody else already said this is what you need to do to get from point A to the goal of the certificate, right? Someone already decided that this is what you have to do. And all you have to do is follow the steps that they've already laid out, do well along those steps, well enough that you'll be able to qualify for this certificate. And then you can move on from that point after 12 months, right? But a lot of times we don't organize things like that. We don't know how long it's going to take. We don't know when it's going to end. We don't know what week 1 is going to look like versus week 11 versus week 15 or 16. We don't know how many term periods or how many different segments we're going to break things into. Is it two semesters or 2 segments per year? Or is it, multiple, like maybe I need 10 giant steps in 3 years and portion that out. Who knows? But the best way to structure things is to kind of know what it takes to get there. But not only knowing what it takes, not only having the motivation, the drive, and structuring it, but kind of doing well at it as well. And then noticing if there are any kind of roadblocks or barriers or bumps along the route, If you notice that there's any kind of issues coming up for you, then that's when you can tweak this, tweak that, along the way, and knowing what that looks like, right? So I'm going to break this down a little bit more specifically, okay? So here on Game and Compute, we talk a lot about finance, right? Side hustles, finance, goals. Finance and financial, if you'd want to call it financial stability, or, reaching financial goals, that's something that is a pretty lifelong process, right? Like, you can reach goals along the way. We all can. And we can also set up barriers along the way for ourselves. And barriers can just happen to us in the form of emergencies, in the form of, challenges, in the form of, a tire blows out, or you need a new car, or you need a new laptop, or you need something that you may or may not have the funds for, or you may or may not have been planning to use the saved funds or the emergency funds or the backup money that you have for this specific cause. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it'll be more of a struggle because something came up, right? So a lot of things vary, right? So that's one thing to also notice is, what does that look like? But with financial goals, the interesting thing about them compared to a lot of other things is that it's a lifelong thing. So I gave the example before of like the class, like say you're taking a certificate program and it's 2 semesters. I'm not going to go through that whole thing again, but say you're taking a certificate program and it's 2 semesters in length, 1 year long, 12 months, and you know that by the time you get to month 12, if you have the certificate, that's it, right? Now that certificate can lead to different job opportunities, depending what field it's in. You could technically get it revoked if, like for example, for the field I work in, if I get a DUI, I'm likely to lose my job, right? So there are some fields where it's like, okay, even if I have a certificate or the degree or whatever, I may not be able to have all the opportunities that the certificate requires if I'm not following the rules that I need to follow along the way, or if some other urgent situation comes up. I can't just do whatever I want just because I feel like it, or I can't just do whatever is going to work for me. Sometimes there are going to be limitations, right? But all that aside, when we look at finance, usually we have a goal, and I can tell you my goal. I mean, right now I'm not 40 yet, and my goal is to have in my retirement, somehow by the grace of God, by the time I'm done through age 40. So at the end of age 40, when I turn 41, like right before my 41st birthday, I want to have double the amount of my annual income in my retirement account. Now I have multiple years before I get to that point. Not like a decade or anything, and less than half a decade. So it's not even that long. But also, my rent is cheap. I don't have a lot of expenses. Car's paid off. I don't have a car payment. I don't have a lot of payments for anything other than rent and food and gas and car maintenance. Basically, like, those are the major expenses. So if I really had to hunker down and really had to not spend and really just stop my social life, stop going out, no drinking, no restaurants, no nothing, I'd basically be just almost solely having the majority of my income that I could just pump into my accounts, my retirement accounts. And I could also put that into some investments, and within a few years that would grow as well. Now in a few years, that's different than 5 years, different than 10 years, different than 20, 30 years of growth, right? But looking at it all, it's possible to get there if I sacrifice now. But I don't think I'm really gonna sacrifice now, because there are different things that I want, right? So I'm just using my own personal life as an example. I want to move and get my own place. That's going to require me paying more rent than what I pay now. So that's going to be less money that I can put into my retirement account. But less money can come from different places to cover that. My expenses could potentially even out. Certain things that I notice, I do get takeout a lot or eat food that's maybe a little more pricey than I likely would if I lived by myself, because of how I don't really like to be cooking or in the kitchen when there's multiple people, and I don't really want to interact with housemates, roommates, all these kinds of things. Sometimes I'm just not into it, not interested, don't have the energy, don't have the desire to do so. So I just avoid it and I don't. And that's my own personal thing, but that does cost me money. Now, if I were to have a crock pot, or an instant pot or something that is, or an air fryer or something that I could just simply make a bunch of meals, freeze them, keep them, that would be so much cheaper. But am I going to do that? Probably not, because the level of discomfort is not the discomfort that it would cause for me to have to interact or potentially interact with other people. This is my own personal thing. The discomfort it would cause is not worth the price that I'd have to reduce to. Saving money for me, for that reason, isn't worth, for me personally, it's not worth the stress of having to deal with these people, which is just showing you how much I don't really enjoy interacting with these certain people, right? And I'm a very people-y, nice, pleasant person. I love people, but I also like my space, and I also don't like people pushing my boundaries, and I also don't like people who just kind of get on my nerves. The people I live with, I can just kind of describe. One of them is, kind of in charge, but is trying to be very compassionate and understanding towards everybody's needs. So that person who's in charge and being compassionate towards everybody's needs is kind of having to let some things go, such as certain people not paying their rent on time, certain people not being, quiet during certain hours, certain people who have their own problems of, having too much stuff or storing their stuff in the hallways or having too much shopping in the freezers and just stuff like that. And then also, people who have their emotional, social needs, that aren't met, and then that comes back on me, because it's okay, people see me as the person they can maybe talk to. I appreciate that, but when I'm at home, I don't want to talk to these people. I don't want to talk to any of them at all. And that's just how I feel, and, everyone has their personal preferences with things. So, I don't want to get too much into the details of things. Nobody has absolute perfect mental health all the time. But the people that I live with, they've all kind of got their own things going on that, make it so I don't really want to interact with them so much, because it becomes burdensome for me and it's just a little uncomfortable. So that's why I'd rather spend money, because it makes it easier for me to not have to deal with those kind of things. Or as limited as possible, right? I mean, so that's just one thing to mention. And maybe that's a lot of personal information, but I mean, it is what it is. But I can move, I can move. I'm looking for a place, and I stopped for a while actually because of leases and all this kind of thing, and price rates of, oh my gosh, the rate of living out here is super high. It's super inflated right now, and it might go down, but at the moment we're kind of waiting. But I'm kind of I'm kind of trying to be open-minded. I kind of know my limits with social stuff in the house, sharing with housemates and stuff like that. And I know that I kind of just like to live my life and do my own thing. But financially, it can get in the way. But then like I mentioned, there are ways that I would be saving if I didn't have to live with people, I would save on a lot of levels because there are some things I wouldn't pay for as much. I wouldn't pay for, like if you think about a delivery from Uber Eats, like if I get like an omelet combo or something with a beverage, that's $30 right there with all the fees and the tip and the tax and all that kind of stuff and delivery fees and all that. Or with no delivery fee, maybe it's like $28 or something. But it's like, yeah, without a drink it's like $25. With the drink it's like $30. $30. I mean, I could buy like a couple dozen eggs and all the fixings I need for omelets and toast and eat that for like like I don't know, for like a couple, like at least a week, if not more than a week. I could eat it every day for the same price just about. So yeah, so, and it's not like I don't know how to cook. I do know how to cook. I just don't cook because, I live with people, and if I don't want to interact with them, it's like, okay, well, there's only so many hours between breakfast, lunch, and dinner where people are going to like fluctuate their schedules. So if I'm cooking at noon, I know somebody else is already in there at noon. If I'm cooking at 5 or 6, I know someone else is already in there at 5, and someone else is in there at 6, and someone else is in there at 7:30 in the morning. And there's like different times that other people keep their schedules pretty strict, which does help because then I know what their schedules and routines are, and then for that reason I'm able to more easily avoid them. But I give that long example to express that, there's definitely stuff that comes up that makes it so that it's hard to reach financial goals, right? I have a really high food budget that could be way, way lower than it is, but the reason why it's not way lower is because I'm spending the money for my own comfort levels, and trying to eat within a certain healthy range. I could technically eat like Del Taco, like dollar menu, and that would technically work, but I mean, I don't think that would be good for my health. Or McDonald's cheap burgers. But even fast food is kind of expensive now, and I feel like, if you're going to eat that anyways, you might as well just eat the $1 or $2 more price in other food that's better, but that's just how I see it. But yeah, there's always going to be some kind of potential barrier that might come up or that does come up. And so like when I look at my own life, I say that, eating is a big one. That's a big expense for me. Gas isn't a big one anymore. But certain things are, like if I want to have a little staycation or a little getaway, one option is to drive and go see my family that lives nearly 100 miles one way. Or another option is to get a hotel locally and pay, a couple hundred to stay out of the house for a couple nights. Either way, gas is going to be pretty pricey. I'm going to spend, the other day when I filled my tank, it was like $65. And that tank, I think I filled the tank on Sunday before Thanksgiving, and that lasted me until Saturday evening. I put in another $30, and I still have some of that gas in my tank right now. So that means within the week, I already spent $95 in gas. But I haven't spent all of it yet, so I'm pretty sure by the end of maybe this week, that's going to be $95 in 2 weeks that I've spent in gas. And that's a lot, and I haven't really gone many places. But it's like, luckily I'm working from home. I do go out in the community sometimes, but I'm working from home, so I can kind of arrange my schedule, and we do get a partial reimbursement. So if I can schedule to do errands while I'm out in the community and just take my lunch break doing errands, stuff like that, it saves a couple bucks here and there. But before I was spending like $8 a day round trip when gas was a little under $3. Now gas is like over $4 out here. It's like sometimes it's $4.80 something, sometimes it's $4.60 something. It's pretty expensive. So yeah, with gas where it is, it's like, that's almost like, if I worked where I used to work, that would be almost a little, I mean, I round, so I would say nearly $10 a day. which is a lot. If you're driving to work to and from 5 times a week, that's, 10 times 5, that's $50 already. And for the month, that's already $200 just in gas that I don't spend $200 in gas. But I mean, right now I don't, but then I probably might sometimes spend that much money on like Uber Eats or something. Like, that's very possible. So that's kind of how I look at things. It's like, okay, there's always a reason. The reason why I'm bringing all this stuff up, there's always a reason why the finances might not get where they need to get. There's always a reason. It's not, unless you're just losing your money, all the time, you losing your wallet, losing your checkbooks, people are like, hacking your accounts and stuff. Like, unless you have a life where that sounds very unfortunate and terrible, and I hope to God nobody has that happening all the time. But if you do, first of all, please get help for that. And then second, that's not normal. So I wouldn't say that anybody has a life. That's not very common for anybody to have. Hold on, I have to text a friend back really quick. So yeah, sorry. My friend was supposed to drop by tonight, which is why I was trying to record early, but they said that we're gonna figure out what we needed to do on Sunday instead of doing it tonight. So, that buys me some more time. But yeah, so there's always a reason, right? So the way I want to talk about goals, and I know you guys know that I'm lengthy, and I feel like it's better to be lengthy, for the people who want more content, who want lengthier content, who want more details, who want more info. I'm here for that. I'm here to provide and, give you more details. When I've got the energy, I'll give it to you, So I'm not gonna be like, oh, let me just put out a bunch of 5-minute little things. I feel like there's something for anyone who tunes in, but I try not to provide information that everybody already definitely knows. You can find information about goal setting. You can find information about motivation. You can find information about different things, but one perspective I don't really see spoken about often with finances is the perspective of how barriers come up and how barriers play a role in financial goal setting and goal keeping. So for my own life, because I described kind of like the dynamics I have when it comes to things like roommates, housemates, rent, food, taking little vacations, spending money on a hotel, spending money on gas if I want to escape town for a couple days or something and just feel like I got a break. There's certain stuff that we can do. Now, if I were able to tolerate the situations that lead me to spend more money, right? If I were able to tolerate those easier, without feeling overwhelmed by them, I would spend less, right? I mean, a lot of us who have the luxury to be able to overspend in certain areas, because not everybody has the luxury. I know some people, like literally, if you can just only eat and you literally only have enough money to pay for your food, or if you might not even have the money to pay for food, that's a whole different conversation. I'm not necessarily talking about that. I do find it important to realize that there are definitely people who can't afford anything right now. Maybe it's been going on recently. Maybe it's since the Rona. Maybe it's since, maybe it's been like a lifelong struggle, maybe it's been a multiple year struggle. People have things that have kind of, partially damaged them for a temporary amount of time. Maybe for some people it might be permanent damage, maybe for some people it might be temporary damage. But not all of us are always in the same financial situation. I mean, I've had times where I was like, dude, like, hitting a food bank might actually help me, because otherwise I'm going to have to make some pretty drastic decisions. I've gotten to points where it's like, okay, like the rent's going to be a little late. I got to wait for my second paycheck, or like the car breaks down. I got to decide, it costs as much as rent to pay the car, so am I going to pay the car now because it broke down, or what am I going to do? So, I see that as, sometimes it's temporary, and you can look at the finances and be like, okay, I'll be okay within 3 months. I'll be okay within 6 months. And if you have some wiggle room, if you have some things you can do late, if you have some things that, maybe it's going to piss some people off, but maybe you'll still be, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's embarrassing to ask for loans or borrow money, or to pay the rent late, or to request, okay, I can't pay this, or like to go, to food banks or something and get the free food and stuff. It's not like the most proud moment that a lot of people have, but I think too a lot of people get into those situations. So I do want to say that is normal. It's not something that's something to be like embarrassed or ashamed about. If you have to use those types of methods just to get things on track, then do it. I would say do it. Because, it's a temporary solution. It's a temporary solution to get things back on track for you without you having to sleep on the streets in the cold or in danger, or, it's still a method to get your needs met. Even if it's not ideal, even if it doesn't feel like something you're going to be proudly bragging about to your friends, it doesn't feel good. You don't want to tell people, oh yeah, I used the food bank, or, oh yeah, but I'm not judging it. I'm just saying that's how I felt. When I've used those in the past, I felt like, oh man, like it doesn't make me feel like happy about myself. But then at the same time, those unhappy situations can lead to making other financial problematic choices. And so I noticed, for example, whenever I would, like, this is in the past, and I'll be honest about it, I've taken payday loans before and gone into, like, I don't know what, like, the money, I don't know what it's called, one of those money places where you go in and you tell them your pay stub, and they check your bank, and then they're like, they already see that you're broke, but then they'll be like, okay, well, we'll just loan you $300 or $255 that you have to pay back at $300. We'll loan this to you. This money is available to you. You can have some. That's kind of the conversation, right? Here's some money for you. Take this. Pay us back $45 in 2 weeks, extra on top of this amount that we just gave you. So in my head, it's like, okay, this is a solution for now. I can afford the gas. I can afford the groceries. I'm going to take that money. I'm going to spend the money. I'm going to get my needs met. But then at the same time, if I'm in a mindset of like, man, I'm struggling. Wow, I had like $10 before I hit up the payday loan place. Now I have $255 now that I've, got the money in my pocket. And if that money doesn't have goals, and if I'm already in a stressed mindset and I'm already not feeling well, it's very likely that I would take some of that money and spend it on something that's not part of any of my other goals, right? So say, for example, I might go buy a burger. I might go buy some cake. I might go out, take an Uber out to like go out for a couple drinks with my friends, and then buy dinner. And it's like all of that, if that's kind of how my next 2 days looks, that's multiple dollars that I didn't have to necessarily spend on things that weren't necessities. But it's like, if I'm trying to, like, there's a difference between having fun and, creating like a balanced lifestyle. And, I'm not saying don't go out, don't eat cake, don't eat burgers. I'm just saying, like, if the stress that creates a situation where it's like, now I need to avoid the stress by going out and partying and doing other stuff, then that creates a part of a cycle where it's like, okay, now I spent some of the money on something else that didn't go anywhere towards my financial goals. Then I'm trying to maybe get to a point to pay back this $300 and then have some more so that I don't fall into this situation again in 2 weeks. And I'm not saying this applies to everybody. There are plenty of people who can use a payday loan once and then that's the first and last they'll ever touch it. Good for them. But for some people, if you've had situations like the ones I've had before, it's like, it's hard to recognize the cycle of what's going on. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, is that if there's a cycle that's being created, that's leading you deeper down, levels down lower and lower and lower, and you're feeling lower and lower and lower and emotionally feeling worse and worse and worse, and then your spending is attached to your emotions, and what you spend on might be attached to other things that are also going to impact your emotions. Like if I'm drinking alcohol and eating a bunch of junk food and, taking a couple days off work to go party or to recover from partying and stuff like that. And if I don't I do get paid when I take days off work, but if I don't get paid for taking days off work, that could create an additional issue. And then I'm not judging. I'm just saying, like, this is what it can look like. Sometimes where it's like hard for people to get out of those cycles, because it's like, okay, $255 can be, it's not that much money. It's not that much money. It's not going to pay your rent. I mean, where I live, it's not going to pay your rent. It might pay, like, in my situation, that's like not even a third of my rent. Like, I pay a little more than that. No, that would be approximately a third of my, no. Sorry, I can't count. Yeah, that would be about a third of my rent. Yeah. And I'm sharing. So if I wasn't sharing, my rent is likely going to double what it is now. I'm paying really cheap rent. Most people I know are paying over $1,000 to rent a room where I live. I'm paying a little less than $800. So I'm one of the lucky ones in that. So that's another reason why I stick out this crappy situation where it's not too crappy, but it's just a little lame and a little like, this is annoying. I see it like as an annoyance that saves me money. That's kind of how I see it. Like, the money at this point is worth more than, drastically changing my life and having to pay double in rent. But yeah, if you do have barriers that are coming up that are making it hard to even get out of a hole, then, you might want to look at kind of what it is that's emotionally going on and see if you can resolve the emotional end of it. Because then when you get the $255, or if you do have to take loans, or if you do have to use food banks, or if you do have to do something where it's like maybe you don't feel comfortable about it, at least you'll be able to cope with it in a way that you'll dig yourself further out of the hole versus dig yourself deeper down into the hole. And the point I was at when I was at those stages, I was digging deeper into the hole because of how I felt of having no money. And then when I did get some money, because it was some option to get some kind of money, I wasn't really spending it the way I needed to spend it. And then I would just keep taking the money, renewing the loan, finding different ways to get money that's like that. So it was like, I'm always owing, and the worst place to be in is when you realize, shoot, this month when I owe, I'm going to owe more than I make. Or this pay period, I'm going to owe more than I'm going to make. And if it's automatically coming out of your account, that's kind of when you're like, oh, shoot. Like, there's no way I can make the rent. There's no way I'm going to be able to pay for groceries. There's no way I can do the basic stuff, and it took me getting to that point where I was like, this is the last time I borrow money from somebody because of my own situation. Like, it's one thing if it's like, okay, like, all hell breaks loose and everything you own is just kind of like broken down, or there's like theft and somebody steals all your important stuff. And then like, I have family that's helpful, that, they're not going to just let me like starve or like stay on the streets, but I'm also not going to take advantage of that either. and only use them as needed, because that's my own comfort level. It's like, unless it's a situation where it's clearly an emergency, I'm not going to really ask them to pick up the pieces for me. But then sometimes it's like, sometimes you do need a little bit of help, and there's no shame in getting the help you need when you need it. But just trying to think about, okay, once I get the help, what am I going to do differently? What am I going to change? So if you're in a situation where you feel like there's a hole that's been dug or being dug, just trying to look at it that way can really be helpful. There is a way out of it. There's a way to get yourself to a place that you can function monthly, every 2 weeks, pay your bills, get things done. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work, depending how long things have been going on, depending what's in your control, what's not in your control. You might have to take some back routes and back alleys and side, paths to get there. It might not be just like, okay, I get my paycheck and pay all my bills. There might be other little steps you have to take between. But say that's not the situation. And, I know I've been there. So I just want to say, I put that all out there just to say, like, when I talk about if people have no money and stuff, I just want to make it clear. I'm not here to be like, you should have money if you don't have it. But looking at it can be one of the scariest things. Like, because I've talked about this. I remember literally not checking my bank at times. I'd be like, I don't even want to check this because I know I don't have hardly any money. But I'd rather not know how much money I don't have and have to think about it and deal with it, because I couldn't really emotionally tolerate having to sit and deal with it more and more and more. As it was adding, I would look like maybe a couple days before rent was due, and I'd be like, oh, thank God if I can actually afford it. And then all I have to do now is figure out my gas and groceries. Like, that's literally how I would do things. Like, so, I mean, I laugh at myself, it's just like, that was not, smart. But I mean, hey, we all learn, right? And I had to learn by doing, and I sure learned. And along the way, I learned so much about finance, so much about how emotions play a role, so much about so many things that I feel like I would be clueless about. I learned a lot of life skills, a lot of resources, a lot of different things that if I never had those situations, I would never have known. And I have friends that during the Rona, had all these situations coming up. Unfortunately, for the first time, it seemed like they weren't able to afford this. They weren't able to afford that. They were, in debt over here, in debt over there. Work was cut over here. Work was too stressful, and they were like overwhelmed. So overspending on this other end, and all these things were coming up for them. They couldn't really manage. And a lot of it was emotionally managing things too. And I was here like, with my, information, just a brain full of information where I could just tell people like, hey, like, you can take out a loan on your own retirement. Like, you can do this other kind of thing. You can do, like things that kind of help people a little bit here and there. And I'm not here like withholding information. I'm just saying, like, I'm not here to talk specifically about those. If people want to hear about those things, I'll definitely share those too. But I mean, just little things that can kind of help here and there when you feel like you're super stuck. I mean, people have their own ideas about credit and loans and that kind of thing. But yeah, I feel like it's worth knowing about. And, if you do have the resources and you do know what you need to do, and once you do get to the point where, your money's in your pocket and it's not just all flying out to the like automatic transfers and automatic, withdrawals from what you owe. If you have an income where it's like you're actually getting the money, this is what I want to talk about, is when you're getting the money, how do you set goals? How do you keep goals? It's still kind of along the same lines. The emotional is a big factor that a lot of us don't talk about. A lot of people don't want to look at it, can't look at it, can't stand to look at it. It's too overwhelming. We spend so much time, a lot of us, in school, and we're never taught to just stare at your bank and like look at it and like itemize and, account for things, and kind of even like learning kind of like emotionally, how do you react to different things. One example I can give, There's a store that used to be around, I guess. It was called Fry's Electronics. I love that store so much. And I had to learn that, I had this prepaid debit card that I would take. It was like a green dot, I don't know, something like that, green dot card or something like that, that I would load money onto, specifically because I couldn't control my spending. When I went into that store, I would go in there and I'd have all these ideas. I want to buy this thing and flip this. I want to flip this and, make all this money. I'm going to buy all these like computer gaming mouse things and flip them. And I go in there and spend like $400 or $500 on stuff that I didn't even go in there for that. Maybe I just needed some printer paper and I come out with like $500 worth of stuff that, because I got all these ideas flowing in my head. And so it made me literally get to the place where I had to stop doing that. I had to stop even taking my card into the store. I had to quit doing it because I couldn't control myself when I was trying not to spend a lot. And then another thing that I learned to do was don't open the items. Don't open any of them or don't open all of them. So maybe if I bought 5 $99.99 computer mouses, I would open one. Maybe if I just wanted to play with it or use it or whatever. So maybe that one I can't return, but I could return the other 4, right? If I'm really not going to sell it. Because in my head, it's like, oh yeah, I want to resell this. Or I think I did the research real quick online and I think I can flip it. And then I look online when I get home and all of a sudden it's like, nah, these aren't worth what it looked like they were when I wasn't really actually researching. But in my head, I was like, oh, I found like a winning product. And like, I would get a little overly excitable about things and literally just go like so excited and like, oh, I have the money, let me spend it, let me spend it. I'm going to flip this tonight and make like $50 profit on each of these. And then it's like, oh no, I'm not. So there's that. Sometimes having to, make it so that it's just that extra step harder for you to spend the money or to have spent something that you can't get any refund on. It's like, okay, it's one thing to lose $100. It's another thing to lose $500. I mean, it's nobody wants to lose $500 on something that you don't even need. Like, I don't even need 5 computer mouses. It's one thing to maybe have one extra or one that's new versus 5 brand new ones. Like, I only have 2 hands. I only use a mouse with one hand. So there's no way I can even use them all in a logical manner that made any sense. And if I'm only going to sell them and not even make a profit, it's like, well, I might as well just keep the receipt and return it if I can't sell it in a week or whatever that looks like, right? So it's like, instead of getting to that point, because I would get to that point, and this is kind of how I'm maybe incriminating myself here, but I'm trying to explain this in a way that people can relate to. And I know I'm saying things that people can relate to because I literally just had a conversation with my boss this morning in a meeting about Black Friday. And I mean, I'm kind of not necessarily a consumer like that too much with Black Friday or all that kind of stuff. But are there things I like to spend on? Yes. Are there things that I buy that maybe nobody else could care less about? Yes. Are there ways I like to spend my money? Yes. Are there irresponsible things I like to spend my money on versus paying rent and paying bills? Oh yeah, I'll admit that exists too. But it took me a while to shift my mind into not spending at Fry's Electronics like that. And to not, spending all my money that I actually need for stuff. And it took me a while to get to a place where I can be comfortable looking at my bank and like excited to like think about what next steps I'm taking with the money that's actually in there and not seeing a bunch of negatives or red numbers and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not bragging. This is not a brag because I literally just told you a whole bunch of stuff that was not very pleasant. It took a process to get here. And for a lot of people, it's going to maybe take a process for some people. Some people might hear something like this and be like, oh yeah, that's cool, I'll just do it right away. A lot of us, we have to work on things. Like, I literally had to work on the emotional stuff, work on the stress levels at work that were making me spend so much money on the weekends. I had to get to a place where I didn't need to spend. And it wasn't really the spending of the money, it was more the experience I was getting from what I was spending on. Partying is fun, but to party safely, I'd have to Uber, and Uber's not free. And Uber costs more money. And if I Uber, then I know I can maybe drink more because I Ubered. And so that's going to cause me to spend more money too. And so there's different stuff where it's like, I'm going to spend more. I'm going to, have more money spent, more money going out, making less responsible decisions. And all along, it was within my power to not do that. Now, along the way, I did get a pay increase. Along the way, I did get some, less stress at the job. Before I switched jobs and got a pay increase, the Rona actually, in a way, for my job, the type of job I do, turning everything into phone services when I was still in an office and still getting paid less, just turning everything into phone services actually did make things less stressful for me, because it was less of an emotional drain and less of a compassion drain for me to be able to talk to people, talk to clients, and do the work I needed to do kind of on the phone. I mean, the quality of what we were doing for work, I feel like wasn't fully there, because a lot of what we need to do face-to-face really helps, getting the kind of emotions and different kind of perspectives and human social experience and things like that really helped with the connections and the rapport, and like all those things were really helpful. But like for the people to feel like more supported. But on our end, as the staff, it was a lot easier to not have to, emotionally drain ourselves or give so much, emotional attention. And, when people are on the phones, maybe they're at home, everyone was stuck at home and they're on the phones and their families are in the background, they're kind of checking in, but they're kind of not really like emotionally like unveiling a lot of like personal, like private details that, sometimes, honestly, it's hard to have a job where people that you work with have a lot of trauma and have a lot of severe things going on in their life. And just to even take that on, to hear about it multiple hours every single day, it's draining. Can I do it? Yes. Did I do it? Yes. Do I like doing it? I love being there for people like that, but I have my limits too. I'm only human. And so I did notice that when we switched to phone services, because of the dynamics that the people had at their houses and the arrangements and setups and stuff, like people weren't like able to freely talk to us like as much as maybe they wanted or needed to, which I don't think was fair on their end, but we couldn't do it any other way. So in a way, there was a lot less emotional drain to me personally, and to a lot of us. We kind of noticed, yeah, it's boring, yeah, it's low stimulation, but finally I feel like I can breathe. And that was one of the first times I was like, wow, like I started looking at things like, wow. And I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't go out and spend my money places. Like I couldn't take an Uber to meet my friends at the bar because there were no bars. I could meet my friends, but taking an Uber would have made like no sense. We would meet like at a park or at the beach or somewhere that's completely free and play cards and just chill and relax. Maybe everyone kind of brown bag it and bring your own kind of food along the way, your little takeout, and just eat together and stuff. And we would socialize and talk and have like a nice wholesome time without the party mode and being inebriated and under the influence to a point where you start making bad financial decisions along the route and having to Uber all over and spending extra money and spending money on food where you're having to tip because you're eating in a restaurant, and like all these things added up financially. So I realized when I had to stay in or socialize differently, or when work was different because I was working. Actually, I was one of the lucky people that got to keep my job, and actually the field I work in actually in a way became much more essential than it even was before because there were so many more people in need. I'm not happy about the level of need that was coming up, but I'm happy that we had resources to be able to open new companies for people to get more support. And that's kind of where it came in on my end, that I got moved or offered to move to a different company that paid more, that was a better option for me. Lower stress, more pay, less work. I mean, like, you kind of can't really luck out in any other way, you know, going from like 5 to 7 years worth of like working paid for 5 years, if I count the non-paid years, 7 years just about of working non-paid. I'm 2 extra years on top of the 5 that were paid, so 7 total years of combinations of working, and then finally 7 years in getting a job that's less stressful, that pays more. I hadn't had a pay increase in like 7 years, really, in like 5 years if you count just like going from like an intern level to a level of like working for pay. But man, I just want to say it's a journey a lot of times, and that's something that it's hard to really wrap around, a journey of something that we want now. We want it now. I want my finances to change now. I want to have money now. I want my investments to grow immediately. You know, I want to reach my financial goals now. I want to do it now. You know, it's something that is a process, and the patience that it can take can be a little stressful. But when you start seeing results, you know, like, I'm telling you, I can't even explain how happy I was, how much more beneficial I found it the first time I got a paycheck. And this was like in a length of time, the first time I got a paycheck that was all my paycheck, and people weren't withdrawing automatically out of my paycheck, other than like, you know, deductions for like taxes, or deduction, like, you know, what goes into my retirement automatically, that kind of stuff. But it wasn't coming from loans. It wasn't coming from anything. It was just pure paycheck. I got my paycheck, and then, yeah, I have expenses, but like I was saying, my expenses are gas, food, rent. I don't really have other expenses unless there's some emergency that comes up. So the other expenses I make for myself. Going out is an optional thing. I mean, it's healthy to socialize and interact and go out. Do I do it way more than I probably need to? Yeah. Do I spend more on it than I probably should? Absolutely. But, you know, when I realized that, you know, that relief and happiness of getting my check and checking my bank account and seeing money there. I mean, I can't tell you how many times previously that I had opened my freaking bank app and been like, oh, please God, I know my payment just got posted. Let me just have enough money for what I need, at least. And I had nothing else in my mind of like how to plan and structure and budget, and like, I knew kind of how to do those things, but I just was emotionally not there yet. I wasn't ready. I hadn't hit the rock bottom. I hadn't hit, you know, the level I needed for things to feel worth what I was worth the change. I hadn't changed because, did I need to? Yes. Would it have been wise and smarter to have done it earlier? Absolutely yes. But did I do it? No. And why? Because I had an emotional reason that was attaching me to using too much money, not checking my accounts, and overspending, and then getting into debt, and then using the debt as the solution when the debt wasn't the solution. The solution was working on the emotional stuff. And that's just a whole process of its own, because now it's like I have this whole lifestyle that I have to keep balanced just so I can make sure that it's not affecting all these other things. It's like when I'm stressed, I don't eat properly, I don't exercise properly, I don't sleep properly. All those things make it so that, I spend on stuff that I don't need to spend on. I spend more on caffeine. I don't cook as much. I'll get more stressed and overwhelmed, so I'll buy more takeout and not go run my errands. And I'll, like it affects me financially in ways that seem small. One thing I started doing at the very beginning of this process was when I saw how much money I needed to cover everything. Once I realized that I had it in my account, I didn't touch that money. I put it where it needed to go. And then I portioned out what I needed every day. That was the first step of what I did. I wasn't even really budgeting at this point. I was just like, pay the necessities. And then there was a point where I was like, okay, like say for example, if I could spend up to $30 a day. So if my gas is already paid for, if my food is already paid for, and if like as far as like groceries and the house food, and if my rent is already paid for, it's like, what more was I spending money on that was like $30 a day, right? But at least I was like not going over that. So say if the $30 was my limit for, I don't know how many, 2 weeks, whatever, I would spend only that amount, only what I need, only what was a necessity. I would only spend on that, and I would try not to go over the $30. And then I was like, well, okay, the $30 is fine, but it's not that motivating to just be like, I can spend $30, and if I don't spend $30, then what, So I did, I think that's when I started getting interested in like investing, in like small term investing, like in Robinhood and stuff like that. And I remember taking the money and like, okay, like say if I spend $25 instead of $30 today, then at the end of the day, I'm going to invest the $5. And then I do it the next day. Oh, this day I didn't spend any money, so I'll invest the $30. Or I'll have like a plan of what I want to do. And I'll say, okay, I need to actually save $10 a day of the $10 a day out of the $30 I can spend. I can go up to 30, but spending 20 would be better. And then if I do that for 10 days, I'll have $100. And with that $100, maybe I wanted to take a little day off and have a hotel room and just have some friends over or something, so I could take that $100 and do that one thing I wanted to do. And still be within the budget. And, so I would kind of look at it like that, where I was like, okay, I can still like reward myself and get stuff done, and kind of like either like a little delayed gratification or just trying to be a little more financially responsible. And that's kind of how it looked when I was actually able to start paying the basics. I then started kind of doing a process that was kind of like that. And then I slowly tweaked everything little by little, saying, okay, like, what's the next step from there? Like, okay, yeah, I'm still spending $30 a day, but it's like I'm not really getting anywhere on this goal or that goal or whatever it may be. So it was like I kind of had to, change things up here and there little by little till I got to a point where I could afford what I needed, be responsible with my money, have some savings, have some investments, have the bills paid, have some emergency money, have everything kind of managed. And like I mentioned, I live in a very expensive city. I don't make a whole lot of money. So, if I can do it, anybody else can do it, And then on the side of that, having additional income that's coming in from things that you can do, things that you can figure out on your own. But I don't really know. I feel like if you can manage the emotional, you'll mostly have it down. It's just harder, to wait. A lot of times we want the goal now. So if you can find out kind of what you can do to show yourself that you can do it, even if it's, I mean, whatever that looks like for you, really, like it can look different for different people. So I just want to encourage people, the holidays are upon us, for depending if you what you celebrate. Kwanzaa's coming up, 26th of December. Hanukkah already started. What night was that? Sunday evening. Thanksgiving already ended. Christmas is coming up. So it just really depends what it is that you feel like you're gonna do, what you feel like you need, what you feel like you want, what you feel like is best and appropriate for you. We're all on our own journey, and I'm not here to judge. Like I mentioned, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to say if you've made past mistakes, like, oh, you screwed up. Like, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not, trying to, make people feel worse than they already do. But definitely looking at the emotional aspect of things, that's definitely worth, figuring out, because that's a lot of times what's going to be underlying your spending habits. It's usually not, if you don't make enough money literally to pay your bills. Like, say my rent is $785. If I didn't make $785 a month, that would already be an issue, because it's like I'm already not making enough to pay one of the three major things I need to be paying. Or if you make enough to pay rent, transportation to and from work, and for your food, if you make enough to pay that rent, transportation, and food, but that's all you make, I mean, if there's an emergency that comes up, you're not really gonna be in an all right place, unless you have a side hustle to make extra money to pay back if you use credit cards or something. You want to be able to do things easily. So it's not impossible, but it's not, the easiest thing on earth. But a lot of times it's within our power. It's within our own power to do it. It's just doing it that can be the issue, and getting the desire to do it. And if you don't want to do it, ask yourself, why? Why is it that I don't want to start working on these emotions that are getting in the way of my spending? Like, there might be something there. Like, maybe you're not ready to work on that, and that's something I faced too, at a time where it was like, I'm not ready to really work on this, because there is pain and stress in dealing with emotional things that you have going on. It might be something recent, maybe a breakup, maybe work stress, maybe, some grief, maybe, certain times a year for certain people are really challenging or lonely, or there might be a lot of different things coming up. And so to have to work on that is also going to be an emotional stressor. And so, you might not be ready to just start diving into it or working on it, because there might be some discomfort that you're not ready to deal with, or there might be, I would say the resources are there for most people. But it can be hard to access them. It can be hard to want to access them. It can be hard to feel that it's like it's something that you can tolerate to start working on. But you don't have to dive straight in. Like, you don't have to say, okay, today's the day I'm going to dive into, like, I'm going to spend 10 hours worth of my day diving into, like, all my childhood trauma. Like, it doesn't have to be like that, you know? It can be just like, okay, like, what was it what did I last spend on? Did I need that thing? What led me to buy that? Was it within the goal? Oh, I don't have a goal? Okay, why don't I have a goal? And just kind of like having like an internal dialogue with yourself about kind of what the process is that's going on, what leads to the spending. I mean, even if it's just looking at that one thing and you've never even like looked at any of it or explored any of it before, that's a step. It's a step to look at it and be like, oh, I actually am observing this. Even if it's after the fact, I'm reflecting on something that I just did that I know that I want to change with this, but maybe I'm not fully ready to do like a deep dive, but I'm ready to, I can tolerate looking at why I bought this burger. I bought the burger because I'm hungry. I bought the burger because I needed to get out of the house and wanted to take a drive and had to start the car anyways. I bought the burger because it was easier than going home and cooking a burger and dealing with the store and dealing with the parking and the traffic, and I didn't have the energy for that. So I went and bought a freaking burger. I could have bought the same ingredients to make 10 of the same burgers for the next 10 days. But, you know, I kind of wanted that little dopamine rush of purchasing something because I could afford it at the time, and I bought it, and that's just that. And I ate it because it felt good and it was delicious and it hit the spot, and it made me feel better to watch a movie and sit and watch some Netflix and eat a freaking burger. That might be why you bought the burger, you know, and fine. At least you looked at it. At least you went and reflected back on the burger you just ate that you didn't have to spend on, that you maybe had food in the fridge that you could have cooked something anyways, that you didn't have to spend the gas and didn't have to spend the money to go do all that. But you can see, okay, there's a reason behind it. So is that a problem? I don't know. You know, is it a problem to buy a burger once a week? I don't know. Is it a problem to do it every day? I don't know. Is it a problem, you know, that I can figure out, okay, how many times a week now do I want to be spending $10 on a burger? Do I need to set a limit on that? Let me try next week to only buy a burger 2 times instead of every day or something like that. You know, you can look at it and just kind of observe it and just kind of set little goals like that without even having to dive like deep into something. Like, I feel like just the amount of time I spent to explain that in like 3 minutes or so, a person can do without overwhelming themselves, without beating themselves up over it. You're just looking at it matter of factly. It's after the fact, so you can't really change it anyways. Like, you can't go get a refund. You already ate the burger. So, like, you know, just, okay, that's just what happened. I ate the burger. I'm not judging myself. I'm not berating myself. I'm not belittling myself. I'm not beating myself up about this. It's just part of my process of trying to make a change. And that, even just doing that for 3 minutes or so, every so often, if that's all you can do, or every purchase, or at the end of every day, just thinking about everything you purchased and what was the reasoning behind that. How are you feeling? What could you have done differently that you decided not to do if there were other options? And why did you choose to buy the thing instead of use what you already had at home? You know, maybe it was more fun to buy a new video game versus play one of the other 6 ones that I hadn't beaten yet. Maybe it was way more fun to just buy a new one. Maybe it was Cyber Monday and I wanted to go on my Steam account and I wanted to buy the new Watch Dogs. Who the heck knows? Maybe, you know, there are so many different reasons, but if we don't know why we're doing things, it's going to be hard to kind of change it. And then the more you get used to kind of thinking about what your purchases are and looking at them and, you know, reflecting on them, even if you're not changing your spending, you're doing something towards that because you're gathering data, you're gathering information that you can use to then make changes because you're slowly gathering. It's like I used to work in research, right? So, when you have a project that you're working on and you have a pilot, you have a hypothesis, you have, a theory that you're working with, you have a thesis, you have all sorts of, things that tell you how to design the study, and, you just have an idea of something you want to work on. You're eventually going to have to get to a point where you're gathering information towards this, whatever that looks like. But yeah, you're basically doing a project on yourself and gathering the data that you're going to need so that you can once you are ready, you'll have the data, you'll have the information. Once you're ready to run the analysis, for example, you'll have the data. Maybe it's not entered. Maybe you'll need to enter the data, right? Maybe you'll need to take all this information and just compile it and be like, okay, I buy burgers for this reason. I buy Ubers for this reason. I buy Uber Eats for this reason. I buy alcohol for this reason. I go to bars or clubs for this reason. I don't save for this reason. I do save for this other reason. Like, this motivates me to save, this doesn't. And just kind of learning more and more about your own self. It's possible to just kind of know what it is that you need to do, and it's possible to kind of learn what your options are, towards doing different things when you have the data all there. So, and once you do that, like, eventually you're going to reach a point where you're like, okay, I've gathered all this data and I want to make more change. So once you have the data, more data, and once you're ready to actually start making some practical changes, even small little change, you can adjust. And then once you're ready to start the adjustment process, then you'll be able to kind of feel a little bit like better about yourself. And it won't feel like such a huge leap because you've already done a lot of the work. This can be something you do over 1 month, over 1 week, over however long it takes you. It might even take like a year or so, but I mean, at least you'll have the data to work with. But there is going to be a point where you'll need to move past the reflection of all the spending and do something in the real time with the spending. Have some kind of plan for what you want to actually do when the emotions come up, or when you realize you're stressed. Like, is there something you could do before you get that stressed to the point that you're spending outside of your budget or spending outside of your plans for your money? Is there something you can do? Because I mostly just want to say that, a lot of times finances, it can be within our control. Is it always 110% within our control? No. Emergencies happen. Sometimes we don't get paid the amount that we have to actually provide to pay for other expenses. Sometimes we just don't make that much money. So getting to a place to make the amount of money that we need to actually afford our lifestyle, that can be a challenge in itself. So just so many different things. But I want to say, it's not impossible to get there. It takes a little bit of work. 'Cause if you think about, all that we go through, a lot of us don't have the easiest, cushiest of lives. And, people who don't have a lot of money, a lot of times people say, oh yeah, like, I'll be happy if I have no money. I don't need money. Money doesn't equate happiness. I mean, it's not really the money that leads to happiness, but money can be a stressor. If you have a lot of obligations attached to your money and you're not able to control it, and there's other stuff controlling the way that you interact with the money, there can be a lot of challenges. So, I hope that's helpful. I hope people find that as valuable information. But just know that you can do it. You can make the changes. It's possible. And if you work at it, it's likely that you will make the changes. Once you started investing more time and more energy and more efforts into making the changes, you're going to be much more likely to want to keep making changes because you've already gone a distance into it, and you can go little by little, like I said, starting with the data, and then tweaking kind of in real time. And then once you're in real time, actually making those decisions and doing the combination of reflecting on your day and reflecting on your getting good at noticing, okay, I woke up and I was already not feeling 110%. And, where do I go from there when I already don't feel like super well when I wake up, and then had to go through the day and push and grind and, get stressed and more overwhelmed, and then finally at the end of the day, it's like, I'm going to spend all this money because it's convenient, to get the needs met. Sometimes it's like the goals of the finances are no longer an issue. But that can be one thing. But definitely try that, see if it works. And that's kind of one method of looking at things. And I wanted to put a lot of information on myself into this because, money's a touchy subject, and I don't want people to think like, oh yeah, I got it all together all the time, and I'm always perfect with this, and I've never struggled with it, and it's never something that's ever come up in my life that's ever been an issue. I just always knew how to handle money and manage my money and make money, and I was always doing well. It's like, no. I learned like everybody else who didn't really learn properly in school about how to budget, how to manage finances. I learned about a bunch of classes, and I think we learned how to write checks, how to mail letters, how to make like a balance sheet in Excel. And it was more like a computer class or like a software learning skill. It wasn't really about budgeting and finance. We didn't really learn much about that. We knew, okay, it's smart to save and get retirement. Like, we were taught more about like savings, where your money oftentimes in a common bank, your money's not going to grow too quickly. A lot of times, unless you have a whole lot of money in there. I mean, if your bank is giving you a 0.001 interest rate at the end of the year, and you don't have any money hardly in there, I mean, that's not going to help you, in all honesty. You have to have a lot of money to make a return on 0.001. Like, make a return that's worth something, that you can do something with the money. But yeah. So with that, I think I'm going to close out this episode. I hope it's helpful. I wanted to put something out there for early in the holidays, because I know a lot of people are struggling, and it's a hard time for a lot of people to have a lot of things going on. So I'm hoping this is helpful, and hopefully you'll enjoy this. And thanks for listening.